Welcome to our protein lesson number 2. Today we'll be talking about beef grading, beef labels, and aging of beef. All very important. So let's start with beef grading. So what are grades in beef? Most of you are familiar, but let's just go over it really quickly. So prime is the highest grade. And prime meaning the flecks of fat within the lean part of the meat here. There's a good amount of marbling which burns off when you cook the steak. This outside fat here is trim. It's not marbling. That won't burn off, but inside the steak the marbling will burn off. So prime has the majority of marbling versus choice or select. You can see by the next picture, choice has less marbling than prime, so it's less expensive than prime typically, and select has less marbling than choice. So that's how that works. So there's prime, choice, select, and then there's no roll, which is ungraded, and we'll get into that in a minute. So beef grading, again, here's another picture. So prime has the most amount of marbling. It's usually sold to higher end restaurants, more expensive, specialty meat markets, things like that. Choice tends to have a little less marbling than prime we're at. So, but anyway, choice is less money, and then again over here, select has the least amount of marbling, and so again, less money on the select product. So this slide is showing the typical grade out of beef. So 3% of the beef processed is prime. That's why the price is high, and also the marbling, the quality. 5% is an upper 2/3 choice product. So there is no USDA grade for upper choice, but some packers do pack a higher choice product, and some of those packers could be graded Omaha beef, for example. Creekstone is another one. There's some other ones out there that do a really good job. This is not a commodity choice product. This is a lot of marbling, not as much as prime, but it's got a significant amount of marbling compared to commodity choice. And the price is more expensive than just regular choice as well, obviously. 15% is a little bit below that, so there's more of that processed. 37% is small marbling, just regular commodity choice product. Again, if you were doing a cutting against an upper 2/3 choice product versus a commodity choice product, you wouldn't win the cutting if you were the one showing the commodity choice. And what's the difference in price? It could be 20 cents a pound, 30 cents a pound, roughly, something like that. It just depends on the market and the packer and inventory in the country, things like that. But keep in mind, if your customer's looking for something that is better than commodity choice, we can offer them an upper choice program, which is great. You know, again, you don't have to necessarily go prime. You can do an upper choice, and it's a great product. You know, it really is it eats well, very tender, very flavorful. Now, at the bottom there is USDA Select. So 40% of the beef that's processed roughly is Select. Slight marbling, a great product, pretty tough, generally speaking, when it comes to tenderness. And but anyway, a lot of the beef is, and it reflects the price, right? So it's harder to get prime because there's not as much prime out there. Commodity choice is just about the same for the most part as Select in terms of what's available. So that's how the grade out sizes up, and hope that makes sense. So we talked about no roll a little bit. So no roll is less expensive, right, than choice or prime. They're inconsistent in terms of quality, right? Not really, if any, marbling in the product. Very inconsistent. The cover fat, which we'll get into later, is usually a 1/2 inch versus a choice product or higher, which would be a 1/4 inch. So there's more fat, less lean on the product. It doesn't yield well. And you could say it's cheaper per pound than it is, but not really. When you look at it, we start trimming all the fat, and and it's not a great product. Customers' complaints will rampant. But also, you might take a no roll product and you might needle it or further process it or tumble it or tenderize it, right? So that'll make the no roll product, which has little marbling, palatable, be less tough, right? That's how you do it. You take a normal product and you tumble it, you tenderize it, you needle it, something like that. You further process it. And that's how you get away with buying a cheap steak, right, and making it somewhat edible, tender. So Now, what do we? How do we know where we're getting things from? Whether we're a customer, whether we're a vendor, the way that you know that is by looking at the label on the box. Whether it's a box beef or a portion control steak or chicken or whatever it is, all the information that you need is on that label, right? Not the distributor's label necessarily, because everybody's descriptions can be different. But when it comes to a USDA inspected piece of meat, chicken, pork, whatever it is, there'll be what's called a bug number. And you can see it over here on the right. So the bug number is the establishment number, but in the industry they call it a bug number. And the USDA lists out all these different establishments because they have to. In case there's a recall or there's a problem, you want to know who you're going to go back to. So in this situation, it says establishment 1244. So if I went on the USDA website and look under establishment numbers, and everybody can go there and see it for yourself, and you look under 1244, you do a search for that, you'll see exactly who this is. I don't know who this is, but whoever it is, that's their bug number. And now, if for example, if we buy a portion control cut steak, 10-pound box of New York steaks, for example, just for the sake of the conversation, and our cutter buys a strip loin in a box, 60-pound case from a packer, let's say IBP, they buy a 60-pound case, we order the steaks cut, they cut the steaks for us, the steak cutter will put their own bug number on their box because they're the last people to touch it. So we don't know where that raw material is coming from. We don't know how old it is. Nowhere on the box will it tell you that. But it will have the steak cutter's bug number on there. It'll have the date that they packed it. So you could buy literally, just for sake of the conversation, 5-month-old beef, right? A long product, old stuff, kind of purging like crazy. And the steak cutter can cut the steaks and put yesterday's date on it, and it all looked great, right? But it's old stuff. We don't know what that is, right? So, but sometimes it'll show up in a price, like if the market's $7 and the steak cutter bought the meat for $4 because the packer needed to sell it, and charged us, I don't know, $5 or something. We sold it for $5.50, and we're so underneath the market because of the old meat that they bought. That's where it starts from. Does it happen? It does happen, right? But how do you tell? Well, we'll get this later, but you look inside the box of the steaks and you can see purge. You can see a little maybe discoloration, not so red, maybe more on the brown side, something like that. But you can't tell for certain, but you can raise flags, you can ask questions, you can identify things that don't look right in the box. And hopefully you're doing this in front of the customer. And you need to see the label, because you want to see the bug number, and you also want to see the pack date for sure. That's very important, and you want to see the product. So keep those things in mind. Aging in beef. How does it work and why is it important? So when a packer processes an animal, they cryovac the individual pieces, subprimals, into a bag that's sealed, and when you wet age a product, you let it sit for typically 21 days, and we'll get into that later. And during that process, the enzymes in the meat break down the connective tissue, and it makes the product, it makes the beef tender. If you don't age beef or let it age, then you're going to have tough meat no matter what the grade is. If it's a prime product, chances are it's going to be pretty tough because it wasn't aged properly. So how long do we age beef? Well, it depends, but typically, like I said, roughly it's 21 days. Some cuts like tenderloins and top sirloins really only need to be aged for 14 days, but there's no harm in aging them 21. Now, what happens if you age them for 40 days? Does it make it any more tender? Not really. After 30 days or so, it's pretty much ready to go. It's tender, it's aged, and all that. There's imported product that is not aged. For example, markets like unaged beef because it's more red. So they ship it right up from Mexico or wherever the product's coming from. And they stick it right in a meat case in a market, and it looks nice and red, and it's more appealing to the eye for the consumer or the shopper. But in the food service industry, we want aged beef, and it doesn't turn it brown necessarily. It doesn't turn it brown, but what it does do is it's a little bit darker red. But certainly when we age beef, it's much, much more tender. And when we order from a packer, it's our responsibility as distributor to age the beef. If we're buying from a redistributor, typically that product is already aged and ready to go. So that's how it works. How do you tell if it's aged? You look at the label. You can see how many days from the pack date are on the box or on the label. And again, that label gives you all the information typically you need to know. So I always check the label. I really want to see if it's aged properly. If it's on the other side, if it's older beef, if it's 2 or 3 months old, it's going to purge. You're going to see some blood and water in the bag, and it's an indicator that this is old beef. And how do you confirm it? You look at the label on the box. Every box has to have a pack date. So whether you're managing beef in an inventory in a warehouse somewhere, or you're selling it, or you're looking at a competitor's product in their cooler and their walk-in, you definitely want to see the pack date on the box, because that goes to how long it's been aged. And if it hasn't been aged, that's another situation where you want to bring that up to the customer. That's a big red flag. Why is this not aged? It tells the customer that their distributor isn't properly handling their product. So that's how we age beef, and that's why it's important. Labels, right? This is some of the things that you're going to see on a label. You're going to see the this particular item is a ribeye steak, boneless. You can see here's the establishment number over here, right? You could see the you can see it's a 5-pound case, and you can see what's in it. So this is a tenderized product with papin. Papin is a natural papaya. So this isn't natural beef at this point. When they put something, 22% of this product has water, maltodextrin, and sodium phosphate. Sodium phosphate is a tenderizer as well as papin. So when you're quoting a customer, and if they just said, "What's your price on ribeye steaks?" and you gave them a price and you didn't see this label, you would be crazy high for the most part. So you got to be careful about that, right? And a lot of times, you know, steaks they take a whole lip on ribeye and they cut it up and put it in the box. This is a 5-pound case. Why? Why is this a 5-pound case? That's kind of strange to me. And usually they're 10, 12, something like that, random weight. This is not apparently a random weight item, which is really strange to me, because there's always a variance in the way you cut steaks. But nonetheless, this is an exercise on how to look at labels, and you should. So that's one label. Again, here's tenderized with papin. Here's another label. This particular product is a short rib, choice short rib. So here's the grade. Right now, this looks like it's a U.S. Foods product, and you can see the USDA choice label over here. This actually is from the cutter over here. So this is mechanically tenderized. So this is needled, right? Again, so this is a chuck tail flap. This is short rib. It's choice, and my question to the customer would be, why are you buying a choice product that's needle? And this is an item that you would braise. A short rib, you would braise it for 2, 3, 4, whatever hours, and it gets tenderized by, if you put wine in the stock, if you put tomatoes, something acidic will tenderize this particular product. So why do you have to needle it? That's just my question. But anyway, you can see the date on here, the pack date, and then I'm looking all around the box. So here's the establishment over here, right? So this is where it came from, and because this is how many pounds is this box? This is they've taken this out of the box, right, and they've needled it. So they've further processed the product. So this bug number is from whoever packed it. It was not from the packer itself, because this is a further processed product. And you can see who it is down here. Probably can't tell. Probably U.S. Foods, but nonetheless, you see it's a fresh product. Anyway, all this information is great information. The grade, the date, who packed it over here, which you can look up online again, and what the item is, and what did they do to it, and those type of things. How many pounds? If you want to sell a 60-pound case to somebody and you don't know they buy 10 pounds, you're going to have a return. So the pack size is important too. You want to know how much they typically buy or what's in that box. So that's a good example of that. There you go. Needled, right? It's choice. Gives you all the information. Here's another one. This is just a pork back rib, which is a baby back rib. There's different sizes. You know, if you say I need a price on baby back ribs, or your customer says I do, well, what size is it? This is 2-down baby back rib. And again, here's the establishment over here. You can see again, it's from Smithfield. Smithfield, Farmland, IBP. Those are some of the pork packers in the country, big ones. And do they care about the packer? In my opinion, there's not a big difference between Smithfield and Farmland or whoever else, but maybe the customer does. So that's what we want to ask them. Like, does it have to be Smithfield? And you look at the date. No, these are frozen, but you can look at the whole, all the information there. Here's another label, Canadian-style bacon, water added. Again, just questions to ask, looking at the label. This should raise a lot of opportunity to ask questions to your customer when you're looking at a label. You just want to know everything about it. Dry age versus wet age. What's the difference? So dry aging, well, let's talk about wet aging. Wet aging is a packer processes an animal, puts it in a cryovac bag, let it age. Well, they don't age it there, but we would age it 21 days if it wasn't aged already. And it doesn't do much to the product. It tenderizes again in the bag during that 21-day period, or whatever period it is that we're aging it. So we don't have any yield loss really, just a little purge is blood and water coming out of the product into the bag. You can see it. The more purge in the bag in a wet aged product, the older it is typically. You can't tell the age, but you can see the pack date. But again, if it's, you have people repacking subprimals, pieces. Why do you need to do that? Just send the packer box in its own original box. But a lot of vendors, cutters will put it in their box because, again, they're buying old stuff. Now, how do you tell? Again, you look at the product and see if there's a lot of water and blood in the bag. There shouldn't be much at all. If it's a 21-day age product, 30 days, something like that, it'll be nice and tight. You won't see any purge in that bag. So in a wet age product, it doesn't really have a lot of yield loss in terms of liquid. But if you see that, red flag, right? So dry aging, we're going to get into that in a second. It has an intense beefy flavor. So the way that you dry something, you put in a dry age room, you control the environment with humidity and lighting, and you get a big yield loss. It just sucks the moisture out of the product. So you might start with a 15-pound ribeye and end up with a 10-pound ribeye or something like that. But the flavor intensifies because the moisture and all those things are coming out of the meat, and what stays in is the flavor. So you can see here you get a 4 to 19% yield loss. So when you're dry aging a product, you would bill them for the start weight. So if it's 15 pounds, that's what I bill them for. And when they receive the product, maybe it's 9 pounds by the time they trim it, and it's got yield loss in there. But you might receive 9 pounds, but we're billing you for 15 because that's the way dry aging works. So here's a difference. Here's a wet aged product, which is the majority of the beef that we sell, just in a bag like that. And then here's dry aged down here. You can see it's got mold on the outside for the most part, and they trim that up before they cut and ship the product to us, and then we ship it to your customer. But this is a great nutty flavor in the event you've never tried dry aged product. It's expensive because you've got a lot of yield loss, a lot of moisture loss there. Here's just an example of the dry aging process. So day one is just regular, they take it out of a wet age bag and stick in a dry age room. Here's day 11, and I think we're going to go to maybe day 30 or something like that. We'll see. After 30 days in dry aging, it doesn't do much difference to the product. It really doesn't. It doesn't really matter too much. So. But you could see after 22 days is what it looks like. It's kind of ugly looking, but it's a crazy good flavor profile. And then on day 36, 40, whatever, 50, again, I don't see much difference. 60 days. We can dry age something as long as the customer wants us to. Not a problem. If they want to dry age it, 90 days, we can do that. But typically after 20, 30 days, it's good to go. And that is the end of today's number 2 lesson. Thanks for being here. Look forward to seeing you next go around. Thank you.